He thought I was asleep, but I was wide awake, and I exposed his forgery. The night everything began, my house was louder than it had been in years. Not with joy, but with whispers. I'm Arthur Hale, a retired federal judge. 41 years on the bench teaches a man one important lesson. People lie the most when they think you're weak. After my wife Margaret passed away, the house felt hollow. The clocks ticked louder. The hallways echoed. I moved slower, yes, but my mind never aged a day. My daughter visited often. My son Daniel visited only when paperwork was involved. And his wife Claire, she visited when she wanted something. That evening they insisted on a family dinner. Claire cooked. He thought I was asleep. I exposed his forgery.
Oh, Daniel, that's such a lovely gesture.
Only the best for you, Claire.
You shouldn't have.
Daniel wouldn't look me in the eyes. I noticed everything. Judges always do.
After dinner, I told them I felt tired and went to my study recliner, the same leather chair where Margaret and I used to read every night. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and pretended to sleep. 10 minutes later, I heard it. The soft click of my study door. Footsteps. 2 sets. Claire whispered, "Is he out?" Daniel replied quietly, "He took his pills. He's asleep." Pills. I never took sleeping pills. My heartbeat slowed, not from fear, from certainty. They believed I was helpless. Then papers slid onto my desk. I heard a folder open, the faint scratch of a pen. Claire said, almost excited, "Just sign it exactly like his signature. You've practiced enough." My fingers tightened on the armrest. Daniel hesitated. What if he finds out? Claire laughed softly. He won't. By the time he does, we'll already have power of attorney. The house, the accounts, everything transfers. He'll be in assisted living before he understands what happened. My home. Margaret's home. The home I built for my family. I kept breathing slowly, evenly, like a sleeping old man. But I opened my eyes just enough, through barely parted eyelids. I saw Daniel, my own son, forging my name on a legal document, power of attorney, and Claire, standing beside him, smiling. At that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. For decades, I had watched criminals reveal themselves in courtrooms. Now one sat in my own study. So I did what a judge does best. I gathered evidence. Without moving my body, I pressed the small button hidden under the recliner armrest. Margaret had insisted on installing a security recorder after a break-in years ago. They never knew it existed. The red indicator light, invisible from their angle, turned on. Every word, every signature, every whisper, recorded. Daniel finished signing and exhaled nervously. Claire kissed his cheek and said, "Congratulations. Tomorrow, everything he owns becomes ours." I closed my eyes again before they turned. They left the room quietly, but I didn't sleep, because I already knew. 3 days from now, we wouldn't be sitting at a dinner table. We'd be standing in a courtroom, and my son-in-law was about to learn a lesson. I spent 41 years teaching others. In part 2, the next morning they try to make me sign more papers, but I play along, and secretly prepare a courtroom trap they never see coming. Part 2, I signed, but not what they expected. The next morning, I acted older than I felt. I walked slower. I repeated questions. I even pretended to forget where I kept my glasses. Claire watched me carefully from the kitchen. the way a banker watches a vault door slowly unlock. Daniel, however, looked nervous. He avoided eye contact and kept checking his phone. Guilt is loud, even in silence. At breakfast, Claire spoke sweetly. Arthur, you seemed confused last night. You fell asleep in your chair again. I smiled gently. Margaret used to say that chair was dangerous. Makes an old man forget the world. Claire and Daniel exchanged a glance. Then she placed a folder in front of me. Just some routine paperwork, she said casually. It'll help us manage bills and appointments for you. We only want to help. I didn't even open the folder. Instead, I adjusted my glasses slowly and asked a question. Did I already sign something yesterday? Daniel froze. Claire answered quickly. No, of course not. That confirmed everything. I opened the folder. Inside was another document, a medical consent and financial authorization form. A smaller step than power of attorney, meant to normalize their control before the larger theft became official. Claire pushed a pen toward me. Just sign at the bottom. I looked directly at Daniel. For a moment, I almost hoped he would stop this. He didn't. His eyes dropped to the table. So I signed. Claire's relief was immediate. She tried to hide it, but her shoulders relaxed. What she didn't know was simple. I hadn't signed my legal signature. For 40 years, I presided over fraud cases. Judges often keep a private authentication mark, a subtle difference only legal analysts recognize. The signature I gave them? An outdated version I stopped using 20 years ago. Legally useless, but useful to me, because now I had something very valuable. Intent. After breakfast, Daniel left for work. Claire went upstairs to make a phone call. She thought I couldn't hear her, but I followed quietly down the hallway. She was speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. Yes, the document is signed. We'll file it tomorrow. Once it's registered, the accounts can be accessed immediately. A man's voice answered faintly through speakerphone. Make sure the old man doesn't contest. Once the bank transfer begins, it's irreversible. So it wasn't just greed. It was planned, organized, possibly criminal conspiracy. I returned to my study, closed the door, and sat at my desk. Then I did something Claire never imagined. I didn't call my daughter. I didn't call a lawyer. I called someone who still owed me a favor from a case 15 years ago. A federal prosecutor. Michael, I said calmly when he answered. I believe I have an active fraud and elder exploitation case happening in my own home. He went silent, then asked one question. Do you have proof? I looked at the recorder device in my drawer. Yes, I said. I have everything. That afternoon, I made copies of the recordings, placed them on a flash drive, and scheduled an appointment at the courthouse, not as a victim, but as a witness, because I wasn't going to argue with my son. I was going to let the law speak, and the law is much colder than anger. In Part 3, Claire files the forged power of attorney at the bank, but when she tries to access my accounts, federal investigators are already waiting for her at the counter. Part 3, the bank visit. 2 days later, Claire dressed better than I had ever seen her. Elegant coat, perfect makeup, hair carefully styled. She didn't look like a daughter-in-law visiting a bank. She looked like someone about to receive an inheritance. Daniel, come with me, she told my son. It'll be quick. Daniel glanced at me sitting in my recliner. "You'll be okay alone, Dad." I smiled faintly and nodded. "I'll just nap. Old men do that." They left at 10:12 a.m. I noted the time, because at 10:15 a.m. my phone rang. "Judge Harrison," the calm voice said. "This is Special Agent Carter. We are in position." I slowly stood from the chair, not weak now, not forgetful, just patient. "Good," I replied. "Let them proceed." At the bank, Claire walked to the manager's desk with confidence. "I need to update the ownership authorization on several accounts," she said, sliding the folder across the desk. "My father-in-law signed power of attorney." The manager reviewed the document carefully, then nodded politely. "Of course. Give me a moment." Claire squeezed Daniel's hand under the desk. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. Control of my retirement funds, my savings, my investments, my entire life. The manager stood. "I'll just verify this with our senior authorization officer." Claire smiled. "Take your time." But 5 minutes passed, then 10. Daniel began to look uneasy. "Why is it taking so long?" He whispered. Claire forced a smile. "Banks are slow." Then 3 people walked toward them. Not bank employees. 2 men in dark suits. And a woman holding a badge. Claire Whitman. The woman asked. Claire stood. "Yes." "I'm Special Agent Carter, Federal Financial Crimes Division." Daniel's face drained of color. Claire laughed nervously. "I think you're mistaken." "We are not," the agent interrupted calmly. "We are investigating attempted financial fraud, forged legal documentation, and conspiracy to exploit a protected senior citizen." The folder slid from Claire's hands onto the floor. Daniel looked at her. What is she talking about?" The agent placed a small recorder on the desk and pressed play. My voice filled the room. I watched my son-in-law forge my signature on a power of attorney document. Claire's eyes widened. Then another voice played, hers. "Once the bank transfer begins, it's irreversible." Daniel staggered back in his chair. You recorded us." He whispered. Claire couldn't speak. The agent continued. "You're not under arrest yet, but you are being formally detained for questioning. Please come with us." Claire finally turned toward Daniel. "Say something. This is your father." Daniel looked at her, then at the agents, then at the recording. And for the first time, he realized the truth. I had never been confused. I had been watching. Meanwhile, I sat calmly in my living room when the front door opened hours later. Daniel entered alone. He looked 10 years older. "Dad," he said quietly, voice shaking, "you called the police on us." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show anger. I only asked one question. "Daniel, did you stop her?" He had no answer, and silence can be louder than guilt. In Part 4, Daniel learns what Claire was truly planning to do after gaining control of the accounts, and realizes he was never part of her future. Part 4, The Truth About Claire. Daniel stood in the doorway for a long moment, like a boy who had come home after breaking something he couldn't fix. I didn't know," he finally said, his voice barely steady. "Dad, I swear, I didn't know she was doing that." I looked at him quietly. For years I had spoken to lawyers, criminals, and witnesses in courtrooms. I could recognize truth, and I could recognize denial. "Sit down, Daniel," I told him. He sat across from me, hand shaking. "They said she's being questioned," he continued. "They think she planned this for months. But that's crazy, right? She's my wife." I folded my hands slowly. "No," I said calmly. "She didn't plan it for months." Daniel looked up hopefully. "She planned it for years." His face went pale. I walked to my desk and pulled out a thin envelope. "I didn't start recording because I was suspicious overnight," I said. "I started because of small things." I placed photos on the table. First photo, Claire inside my office while I was at physical therapy. Second photo, my document cabinet slightly open. Third photo, her photographing my financial records. Daniel stared. "You had cameras?" "After my watch disappeared last winter," I replied. "Remember? The one you thought I misplaced." His eyes widened. "She took it." He whispered, "Yes." And I returned it quietly because I wanted to be certain. I slid a printed email across the table. It was a real estate inquiry. Claire's name. A luxury condominium. In another state. Daniel read the date. 3 months ago, he said. Then his lips trembled. She was planning to leave. I nodded once. After the transfer cleared, she intended to divorce you. The accounts would have been in her control through legal authority. You would have been left with nothing, and I would have been declared mentally incompetent. Daniel leaned back, staring into nothing. "No," he muttered. "No, she loved me." I didn't interrupt, because some realizations a man must face alone. Then Daniel spoke again, quietly. "She told me. She said you were losing your memory, that you were dangerous to manage money. She said we had to protect the family." I sighed softly. "That is called grooming, Daniel, not protection." His hands covered his face. "I signed the witness line on the document," he whispered. "I helped her." "Yes," I said gently. "You did." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he asked the question he was afraid of. Are you pressing charges?" I looked at him. "I already did." His shoulders dropped. "But not against you." Daniel looked up instantly. "Against Claire," I continued. "Forgery, financial exploitation of an elderly person, and attempted fraud." He exhaled, not relief, not sorrow, something in between. "I ruined everything," he said. I shook my head slowly. "No, you trusted the wrong person. That's different from being evil." Then I stood and handed him a small wooden box. Inside was a simple object, a fountain pen. "My father gave me that pen when I became a judge," I said. "Do you know why?" Daniel shook his head. He told me, "The signature matters less than the character behind it." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Dad." This time, I believed him. But forgiveness and consequences are not the same thing. In Part 5, Claire finally confesses during interrogation and reveals a shocking accomplice. Daniel never suspected. Part 5, the confession. 3 days later, I received a call from the federal prosecutor. "Judge Hale," Michael said. She talked. I wasn't surprised. People who build plans out of lies rarely withstand silence. "What did she say?" I asked. There was a pause. "You should come in," he replied. "You and your son." Daniel and I sat across the table in the interview room. The glass window reflected both of us. A father who had spent his life enforcing the law, and a son learning what the law meant. The recording began. Claire sat on the other side of the table, pale, tired, and no longer confident. The agents asked simple questions at first about the forged document, the bank visit, the real estate inquiry. She denied everything. Then they played the recorder. Her own voice filled the room. Once the bank transfer begins, it's irreversible. Her shoulders collapsed, and she spoke. "I wasn't going to hurt him," she whispered. "I just needed control of the estate." The agent asked calmly, "Why?" Claire hesitated. Then she said something Daniel never expected. Because Daniel was never going to leave him. Daniel leaned forward in his chair, confused. "What?" She looked directly at him through the glass. "You always chose your father," she said quietly. "Every decision, every holiday, every plan. I knew if I didn't separate you from him, we would never have our own life." Daniel shook his head slowly. "So you tried to steal everything." "I tried to force a future," she replied. "Once your father was declared incompetent, he'd be moved to a facility. We'd control the finances. You'd depend on me, and you wouldn't have a choice." The room went silent, but she wasn't finished. "There was also someone helping me," she admitted. The agent asked, "Who?" She lowered her eyes. "The lawyer who prepared the documents. He's done this before, targeting elderly property owners with families." Michael paused the recording. Daniel looked at me in disbelief. This wasn't just her. He whispered. I nodded slowly. No, it was a system. Years on the bench had taught me something. Greed rarely works alone. Daniel stood up and walked out of the room. I followed him into the hallway. He leaned against the wall, shaken. "I thought I married a partner," he said quietly. "I married a plan." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes the hardest lesson," I told him gently, "is learning that love and trust are not the same thing." He looked at me, eyes filled with regret. "I almost lost you." I shook my head. "You didn't lose me." I paused. "But you almost lost yourself." For the first time since the night in my study, Daniel nodded, and he understood. Final Part 6. The courtroom verdict is delivered, and Daniel must decide what kind of man he will be after everything that happened. Part 6. The verdict, final. The courtroom felt familiar to me. The same polished wood. The same echo of footsteps. The same quiet tension that fills a room when truth is about to be decided. Except this time, I wasn't the judge. I sat in the gallery beside Daniel. Claire stood at the defense table, smaller than I remembered. No confidence, no sharp smile. Just a woman facing consequences she once believed she could control. The prosecutor presented everything. The recordings, the forged signatures, the bank attempt, the real estate plan, the cooperating lawyer already under investigation. There was no dramatic argument, just facts. Claire's attorney tried one last defense. She was protecting her financial future. She panicked. She never intended harm. The judge looked directly at Claire. You attempted to strip a man of his legal identity and independence. For financial gain, he said firmly. That is harm. The verdict came quickly. Guilty. Forgery. Financial exploitation of a senior citizen. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Claire broke down quietly as the officers approached. Daniel didn't look away. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just finished. As she was led past us, she stopped. Daniel. She whispered. He stood slowly. For a moment I thought he might forgive her. Instead he said calmly, "You didn't just try to take his home." He swallowed. "You tried to take my father." She had no answer. The officers led her out. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Daniel stood beside me on the steps, staring at the sky like he hadn't seen it in years. I thought being successful meant building a life away from where you started. He said quietly. I smiled gently. "Success isn't distance," I replied. "It's character." He looked at me. "I want to fix things," he said. "I can't undo what happened. But I want to be here. Not out of guilt. Because I choose to." I nodded. That was all I ever wanted. Weeks later, Daniel moved into a house 10 minutes away instead of across the city. We had dinners again. Simple ones. No speeches, no lawyers, no documents. One evening he brought over an old photo album. Inside was a picture of him as a boy sitting at my desk, pretending to sign papers with my pen. He laughed softly. "I wanted to be you when I grew up." I placed the album down. "You still can," I said. He looked confused. "I'm not talking about the profession," I continued. "I'm talking about integrity." He understood. For 41 years, I had watched strangers learn lessons in my courtroom. But the most important one, I finally taught at my own dinner table. I never wanted revenge. I wanted truth. And sometimes, truth doesn't restore what was broken. It rebuilds it stronger. The end.